guys, normally a spark plug change on this car is pretty easy and one can do it in 15-20 minutes, but we ran into some unexpected issues and I'll go over how we fixed them. The first issue was the gaps on the new Denso spark plugs from O'Reilly were set way too low. They should have been set to 0.044 inches, but they were set to 0.36. Even after correcting the gaps, the car was producing misfires, particularly on cylinders 1 and 3. So the next day, we got the free no-hassle replacement from O'Reilly under 2-year Denso spark plug warranty. The gaps on the new spark plugs were still off, but once set to 0.44, the car ran smoothly without any misfire. The second issue we ran into was all the ignition coil connectors broke. In fact, they were so brittle and fragile that they were literally falling apart in pieces. So we temporarily zip tied the connectors together until we got the replacement connectors. The third issue was one of the grommet slots on the engine cover broke. This is not a huge issue, but the next day the same engine cover leg also broke on 2013 Camry on the same position. So it turns out the front rubber grommet hole is just way too small, and it literally takes 20-30 pounds of force to lift it out, and that's why it's breaking the front leg. Like I said, the spark plug change itself is pretty simple, but if you have an older car with lots of miles like this one, this is 2009 Venza with about 175,000 miles, expect some of these problems to occur. But don't worry, I'll show you necessary steps to overcome them at a minimal cost. Now let's go change the spark plugs first. After you remove the engine cover, disconnect the ignition coils. Simply push down on the connector tab and pry it out. Next, remove 10mm bolts on the ignition coil. I like to first loosen the first turn by hand and then use the power tool to take it out quickly. Now remove ignition coils and keep them in order so that we can put them back in the same slot. Now using a 5/8 inch spark plug socket, remove all spark plugs. Again, I like to loosen the first turn by hand and then use the power tool to take them out. Also keep the spark plugs in order so that we can closely examine each spark plug for any unusual wear. Before you put the new spark plugs in, check for unusual wear on your old plugs against this chart. Depends on the condition of each spark plug. There may be additional things you may want to have checked out.
Okay, we're gonna use the electronic cleaner, and we're gonna spray the ignition coil. We're gonna clean the connector point there, and inside where the spark plug connects. You know, this is just to clean the surface before we put it back in. Okay. The reason why we're using the electronic cleaner is, one, it's good for electronic components, so it won't corrode and it will evaporate and dry very quickly. So we're gonna repeat that for all the other ignition coils.
For installation, carefully tighten the spark plugs. Do not use power tool during the installation to avoid any accidental cross-threading, which will cause a monster headache. Also, be careful not to bump the spark plug tip on any object. This will easily change the spark plug gap size, and you could end up with a misfire. So insert the spark plug into the hole very slowly and carefully. Once all the spark plugs are installed, torque them to about 20 pounds. If you don't have one, you can rent one from auto parts store for free. If you don't have access to the torque wrench, then just tighten it until it feels snug. Don't over tighten the plugs and potentially damage the threads on the aluminum engine block. Remember, we kept the ignition coils in order when we pulled them out. So now insert the ignition coils into the same slide it came out of and over the spark plug. And then finger tighten the 10mm bolts first and then torque them to about 8 pounds. Don't over tighten this bolt and potentially break the ignition coil. This is why it's so important to have a torque wrench. Normally at this point, you just connect the ignition coil wiring and you're done. But in our case, all the connector tabs broke, as I mentioned before. So we're going to have to swap just the plastic housing on with the new ones. Note that while we are doing this, the old connectors are literally falling apart in pieces. I have a separate video on how to replace just the connector housing and salvage the existing wiring. I'll provide the link in the description section below. Actual swapping of the plastic housing is actually pretty easy, but the only thing you have to be careful is keeping the 4-color wire sequence intact. So what we did was we took pictures before the swap and we double and triple checked the correct wiring sequence during and after the install. Because if you get this wrong, boy, all kinds of bad things could happen. So once the connectors have been replaced, simply connect them to the ignition coils. At this point, you should start the engine and make sure that it's running smoothly. And it might actually help if you actually take a quick short drive around the neighborhood to get the speed up and give the engine a chance to check out the new spark plugs. I would drive 5-10 minutes and see if you're noticing any rough idle or misfires. If you're seeing rough idle or misfire, then I suspect the gap was not set correctly. But if the gap was absolutely set correctly and you are still getting misfire, then it's rare, but it's possible that you have defect spark plugs, just like what we ran into. But I must say, I've done a ton of spark plug changes, and this was the only time where the spark plugs were defect. If your engine cover leg broke, then you want to continue watching this. While doing the spark plug change on this 2009 Venza and even on 2013 Camry, the front part of the engine cover grommet area broke. Yes, they broke at the same location for the same reasons. I have a separate video on how to plastic weld and fix the broken pieces, and also how to widen the grommet hole with a 1964th drill bit, so that it's not going to take so much, like 20 to 30 pounds of force to remove the engine cover, which tends to break the front part of the engine cover. I hope this video helped, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with more continuous videos on Toyotas and Lexus.